Welcome. My name is Peter Marelas. I'm a Principal Systems Engineer for EMC in the Data Protection and Availability Division. Um, I'm at vBrownbag VMworld 2014, and today I'm going to talk to you about vSphere Data Protection Advanced with Data Domain. So, outline for today's talk, we're going to briefly talk about why you might want to use Data Domain with VDPA. We'll talk about the VDPA architecture and some of the trade-offs between an architecture with and without data domain. And then we'll actually jump into a live lab environment. We'll configure a data domain system, and then I'll show you some tricks that maybe you haven't seen advertised before. So just very briefly, for the people who may not know what data domain does, it's a very scalable storage appliance, very efficient in the way that it stores data, and in particular, one of the unique features of data domain is the data domain boost protocol. What we did around 3 years ago is we actually extracted the dedupe algorithms from the data domain platform, and we turned them into a software library. And this software library can now be deployed into different backup products to make the movement of data into data domain very efficient. And as you can imagine, the data domain boost software is included in every copy of VDP Advanced. So why might you want to use data domain with VDPA? So there's a couple of reasons. Data domain is quite prolific out in the marketplace, and it is a multi-purpose device. It can be used as a backup target by many different backup products, and VDPA is one of them. So you may already have it in your environment, and you may want to extend its use to VDPA. The second reason is very efficient and very scalable when it comes to scaling up. So one of the unique properties of data domain is it's a global dedupe domain. A global dedupe domain means that all the data that enters that system dedupes against all the other data in that system. And we'll see what that looks like when we talk more about the architecture. The other one is it's very easy to integrate with VDPA. As I mentioned, the DD Boost software is already embedded in VDPA, so there's really not much to do when you actually configure data domain to work with VDPA appliances. The other one is resource offload. So we know that VDPA is a software-based appliance. It needs compute and it needs storage to provide backup storage. And that means it's going to take away CPU, memory, and storage from your ESX servers. And when you actually look at it from a scale-out perspective, the numbers can add up quite significantly. And the last one is flexibility. Data domain is an external hardware appliance, and one of the principles of backup is you don't want to mix your primary storage with your backup storage. So being able to back up to an external device is always advantageous. So this is typical VDPA architecture. VDPA without data domain is a scale-out architecture. And you would have heard at VMworld 2014, VDPA 5.8 was announced, and they support now up to 20 VDPA appliances per VMware vCenter. And each one of those appliances requires 12 terabytes of storage, 4 vCPUs, and 4 gig of VRAM. One of the challenges, obviously, with scaling out this way is that you can't scale the storage independent of the compute. So if you need more storage, then you actually have to consume quite a bit of compute and quite a bit of memory to be able to get that storage. And when you contrast it to the data domain architecture, the data domain system is a scale-up architecture. What that means is that the data domain storage can scale up independent of the compute. And that allows an environment that's a lot more efficient in terms of CPU and in terms of memory consumption. Here, for example, we have a VDPA appliance and we have 2 VDPA proxies. Now, the VDPA proxies is a new concept that was introduced with VDPA 5.8. And what it allows you to do, it allows you to give your VDPA environment the ability to process more backup jobs concurrently without requiring the storage in your ESX clusters. So in this particular environment here, we've got one VDPA appliance, which is your master controller, and also houses the backup catalog. And then you have the two external VDPA proxies, which actually take instructions from the VDPA appliance to actually drive the backup process. And data domain is storing all the backup data in the back end. When you look at the efficiencies, they're actually quite dramatic. If you look at the data domain architecture, you need 223 megahertz per terabyte of backend storage, right? If you compare that to the previous slide, you need basically 4 times the amount. And there's similar trade-offs with the memory. In a scale-out architecture, you need 500 megabytes of memory per terabyte, and in the scale-up architecture, you need half of that. So there are real reasons why the data domain architecture scales really well for VDPA. So I'm going to do something very brave and log into a live environment. This environment's back in Australia, so we'll see how this plays out. So there's a couple of things I want to show you guys. So this is the actual data domain systems manager console. It's a web-based UI. But you can also manage data domain through a CLI if you prefer. And to set it up with VDPA, all you need to do is create a user on the data domain system, and I've already created a user here called VDPA, and you give it a password. And you also have to set up SNMP, because one of the ways that VDPA monitors data domain and the way it pulls statistics is through SNMP GET requests. So you have to set up an SNMP community, which I've done here, one called public. And that's all you need to do on the data domain side. There's no LUNs to configure, there's no file systems. All that comes pre-configured when you actually procure a device. Now, on the VDPA side, we need to use the VDP configure web UI. So I'm going to log into that now, if I can remember the password. So this is my VDPA appliance, software appliance. I'm logging into the configuration screen. And all I need to do is go into the storage tab and add a data domain system. I actually already have data domain configured in my lab, but in terms of what you actually have to input, there's really just the username, the password, and the SNMP public community. And that's it. Once you do that, data domain is configured and is available to VDPA for backups. If I actually switch to the vSphere web client and I go to the VDP plugin, I connect to my VDPA appliance, and I'll be able to see that the data domain system is now surfaced in the configuration. Let me just go to configuration. The screen's a little bit small, but there you see it there. I've got a data domain system with capacity of 414 gigabytes. Now, obviously, this is just a lab environment. Systems would be much significantly larger than that. And in fact, what I'm using here in the lab is actually our virtual edition of data domain, which is not publicly available, but we use it internally for testing. Hopefully, it will become available one day. Now, the one other thing I want to show you guys real quick, I'm not sure how can I actually get to the... One of the interesting things with the way we do things with data domain is we actually store backups in native format. So the way VDPA takes a VM image backup is it actually writes it to the data domain in its native format. We don't change the data format. So what that means is if I really wanted to, I could log into the data domain system using, for example, CIFS. I can actually browse the data domain file system which I'm doing here. And these are obscure references to actual backup directories, right? But if I actually drill into one of these, what I can look at is one of the files. This is a mapping file. This tells me that these particular files on the data domain system correspond to the VMware object specifically. So I can see the .ovf, I can see the .vmx, I can see the .vmdks. You see that the vmdks here. So if I really wanted to, I could actually just recover that data without even going back to VDPA. So that's a little trick that is not well known. The other thing I want to show you guys is one of the beautiful things about VDPA is very simple. But when you're starting to deal with hundreds of VMs, those simple management interfaces sometimes are not good enough. And I'm a CLI person by nature, so I like to get into the thicker things. So one of the things I want to show you guys is how to actually view some of the statistics from VDPA using the CLI. So here I've actually logged into the VDPA appliance, and I can use a command called mccli to actually look at the backup activities, the restore activities, and the replication activities for the last 2 days. I just run mccli and I say activity, show. And this is going to give me a lot more information than I would normally get out of the VDPA reports. It will actually do things like give me the deduplication rate, which is particularly important when you're backing up to a deduplication appliance. If you've got a particular VM that's changing quite a lot and you want to pinpoint what it's doing and why it's consuming so much storage, this is the command you can use to do that. But what I would warn you, don't use this command to make configuration changes. Only use it to view things. The other interesting thing you can do, which is not well known, is you can actually browse the backups. If you go to /mount/action, you can see there that's the vCenter server that's actually running, that VDPA is currently managing and running. I can go to that directory, and within it, there's a virtual machines directory. And within that are the virtual machines that I'm actually backing up. So I'm backing up 5 virtual machines in this lab. And I can go to any one of those, let's say OpenStack N1, and now it gives me these options. I can browse the backups by date, by number, by week, by various things. Let's say by date. Now I can see, based on UTC time zone, when all these backups were created. I can dig into one of these. I'm still learning Mac, so I'm not sure what the shortcuts are. Within there, I've got VM files, and 1 means I've got 1 VMDK, right, for 1 disk. And there it is. I actually have my .vmdk files, and if I wanted to get those back, I could just copy them now, right? I can copy them using SFTP or some other method. Now, there's nothing you can do here to damage the environment because this is read-only. So if I tried to create something, it wouldn't let me, right? So it's fairly safe to look at this way. The other area I want to show you is reporting. One of the things that runs on the VDPA appliance is a Postgres database, and that records a lot of the statistics, a lot of the activities, some of the configuration is stored in there as well. You can browse this database if you want to be able to look at history for the last 2 years, but I do not recommend you modify anything within that database, right? The database is called MCDB, right? There it is, it's running. So I can get at it 2 ways. I can actually just use the PostgreSQL command line. I can log into the port 5555 as user. View user is has access to particular views, and actually it doesn't have a password that I recall. So you log in that way, and now I can actually list all the tables. And you see there are lots and lots of tables and lots of views, right? And I can start to drill into it and get a lot of really good information that you otherwise won't get from the VDPA, the simple interface that VDPA gives you. One thing is you can't connect to this database remotely because VDPA runs a IP tables lists. So when you actually look at it, you'll see that it's actually not allowing port 5555 into the VDPA appliance. So one way you can get to it, and how I get to it, is I actually use a Postgres client called Maestro, which allows you to connect the databases through SSH tunnels. Right, so that's one way to do it. And then the last thing I want to show you guys is a free restore use case using VDPA. So one of the things that data domain gives us is the ability to export a file system in data domain as an NFS data store. So what that means is I can actually write to that data store live VMs, and I can actually boot them up. And I might want to do that for testing purposes. And the beauty of it is that because I've already got backups of that VMDK on the data domain system, if I restore them, they're not going to consume any more space, right? And data domain is a qualified data store, is on the VMware HCL. So if I look at the storage here, I've actually defined DDNAS, and DDNAS is NFS, is running on the data domain, and I've actually already restored one of those OpenStack images to it called OpenStack Restored, right? And I did all this using the VDPA interface. I didn't have to do anything special. I just told it perform an out-of-place recovery to the DDNAS data store. And now what I can do is I can actually power that on. And that will actually run off the data domain system. Now, I don't recommend that you keep it running for very long or you go and do heavy IOs on it because data domain's not currently designed for that. But if you just wanted to do it to verify your recovery image before you went and restored it to a primary data store, then it's really a great use case. And, you know, as I said, from a storage perspective, it's free because it's not consuming any space. So I've just powered it on. If I actually launch the console, you'll see this is my OpenStack VM, which is running. It's starting to boot, and it's booting off data domain. So really, it's that easy. So that's what I've got for you guys. I hope that was beneficial, and thank you very much.